Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on F1. We've just finished the Hungary race. That one was a memorable one, and we have a content-rich episode for you. But first, son, what are you drinking?
Yeah, today I have Redwood Mountain Blonde from Discretion Brewing here in Santa Cruz, California. It's a nice light ale. Some good maltiness on the back end. And, I think they market it as like the beer you want to take camping. And if I gave a shit about camping, it would definitely be high up on that list. So,
very nice. Well, I am going to try for the first time ever from Dark Horse Brewery. It's in Lower Michigan. It's a cream ale. Dark Horse Brewery makes lots of IPAs. These smaller breweries often sort of focus first on getting out those IPAs. It's a cream ale. We'll give it a shot. Slancha. That's nice. It's nice. It's a fine beer. If I had a deck, I would sit out on the deck and drink that beer. So, Hungary 2021. There was news before the race, certainly during, and now even after the race. I'm not sure what's the biggest story. There were so many stories in this race. We'll have to count them all down, address each one. Give me your initial thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. There's just so much happening this week and this weekend. But, I figured I would give you three things that I loved about this race, and then three things I really hated about it. So the first thing that I loved was pretty early on in the race, Mick Schumacher. What a drive that kid put in that Haas. It was awesome to see him throwing it around the track, keeping Verstappen and I think Ricardo and Hamilton behind him for as long as he possibly could. Just what an awesome thing to see. Such just a crappy season overall for that team. But to see a young guy, the Schumacher name, really, really working hard. That was definitely something I loved about this race. My second one, Alonso. I mean, another guy. He's like 40 years old this weekend, and he, I think, quite frankly, is the reason Ocon won the race. He kept Hamilton at bay for I don't even know how many laps, and everybody else that Hamilton came up on was passed within 2 laps. It was unbelievable defensive driving from Alonso in that Alpine. Just so awesome to see. He's a legend of the sport. Just a wonderful drive from him.
That was. I have to interrupt you there because that was a master class. I'm watching Hamilton creep up on him, and I'm thinking, well, in that Mercedes, he'll take him this lap. He did, and I was like, great job, Alonso. The next lap he'll get him. Nope, he held him off. And then again. I think he held him off for 10 laps. There was no possible way that Alpine could have held off Mercedes and Hamilton for as long as Alonso did, and somehow he pulled it off. And I absolutely agree with you. I think that's why Ocon won, because Alonso just kept Hamilton at bay for so long. I'm not sure anyone else could have done that. I'm not sure Hamilton could have done that. Leclerc, Vettel. That defensive level of driving was just amazing. And for his teammate to then go on and win the race. What a great story. So we're definitely sort of 2 for 2, because I also agree. Verstappen had a hobbled car. There was nothing he could do. He was giving it everything he could, but it was still so great to watch Schumacher holding those guys off as long as he could, making all of them work for it. Because it's the Schumacher name, you wonder, does he belong there? And this race, he said, I absolutely belong on this grid. So we definitely agree on those two goods, Schumacher and Alonso.
Yeah, for sure. Just awesome racing from those two guys. And then I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me on this one. The last thing I loved, well, not the last thing I loved, but in my top three, Williams in the points again. It has been a long time, but what an awesome thing to have that happen. I know everyone wanted George Russell to get in the points, so it's kind of funny that Latifi actually beat him in this race. But both Williams getting in the points, what an awesome thing to see.
That was amazing. I mean, we just assume Williams will not get in the points. And we assume that if by some miracle Williams does get in the points, it's because of Russell. But both Latifi and Russell made the point. So that was pretty amazing. You know, I mean, Latifi, he came in with sponsor money, with his father's money, but he did well in FP2. He's just been silent his entire career here in Formula One, I think in part because he's in that Williams car, which has just been so poor for so long. And then his teammate is George Russell, one of the better drivers, I think. So that I agree, that was great to see him get points, to see both Williams cars get points. So why don't you give me then the things that you just did not like about this race?
Sure. So one of the first things that I didn't like about it was that we got no on-track battle between the championship rivals. You know, when there's really only one other guy who can compete with Hamilton right now, you want to see Hamilton have to compete with that guy. And for a second race in a row, we didn't get that. It's disappointing to see. You know, there were a lot of other things that were happening in the race that made it fun and exciting to watch. But, you know, that those two, the Hamilton Verstappen rivalry and battle that's going on this season is, I think, one of the attraction points for F1. And, you know, that's two races in a row. We didn't really get to see any of that, which is pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I agree on that one. I mean, before the long summer break, the last two races, it's a tight race for the championship. Hamilton and Verstappen, a lot of bad blood there, and yeah, two races in a row where Max gets taken out, effectively gets taken out. So that was disappointing.
Yeah, and then kind of going along with that, my other thing that I was really disappointed to see was Red Bull's strategy. They kind of screwed Max over when Hamilton came into pit. Mercedes knew what they were doing. They knew they were going two stops, and Red Bull, for whatever reason, tried to cover them off, even though track position is so vital. And all he had to do was just run his own race. With a hobbled car, he was never going to beat Hamilton head to head. So I think, you know, gaining as many positions as he can and keeping as many guys between him and Hamilton as possible was the best thing to do. And instantly they basically screwed their entire race because they tried to cover off Mercedes, and it was never going to happen. So that was pretty disappointing to see.
I wasn't sure about that because I just thought that there was so much damage to his car that they were sort of making decisions, not with data, but sort of a lot of assumptions on sort of the status of his car in the race and what they could fix and what it could do. So this one, I'll disagree a bit with that because I just felt that they really weren't sure what to do after that first sort of corner when you know, Bottas being Bottas took out a bunch of people and damaged and caused all the damage to Max's car, that I think there may not have been sort of time or opportunity even for strategy in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like when Hamilton came in to get his hard tires on, and around lap 20 or whatever, Ricciardo and Verstappen came in the lap after, and both came out behind Hamilton. If I'm those two, we don't have the pace to keep up with Hamilton, regardless of whether or not we come out ahead of him or behind him. So let's stay out as long as we can, make up positions, and not care about Hamilton. All we want is the maximum number of points we can get. And we're digging ourselves a deeper hole by coming in early and trying to cover off the Mercedes. It didn't make sense to me, and I was kind of bummed about it. And then the last thing that I am really annoyed with this weekend is Vettel's DQ. Like, just, I don't know what else to say about it. It's garbage, and it's really unfortunate.
I felt terrible for Vettel. I felt a little bad for Sainz, who came in fourth place originally, but then because Vettel got disqualified after the race, got third, but wasn't there to celebrate. And I think that's at least the second podium for Ferrari where he sort of was given the podium after the celebration. So I did feel a little twinge of sadness for Sainz. And with Vettel, I mean, I'm sure they checked the fuel after, but I just don't ever recall them doing it. They said they checked the amount of fuel in Vettel's car. It wasn't enough per the regulations, and therefore he's disqualified. Or the penalty effectively makes him out of the race. So I was shocked at that. I just. I'm not sure if there's going to be conspiracy theories about it, or what. But Vettel ran a great race, and to sort of see him sort of disqualified, because not enough fuel left in the car at the end of the race just seemed odd to me. And I'm sure it just stings Red Bull, because that's more points for Hamilton, more points for Mercedes, because of this sort of odd rule that disqualified Vettel. And he did such a good race. I mean, he's getting as much out of that Aston as possible. The last couple of years, he's just seemed to sort of lost his mojo in cars that couldn't compete. And he seems to have it back now. Not that the Aston is going to do anything other than maybe a fourth place finish at best, let's say, probably not even that good. But he really seems to be doing his best week to week, and it's great to see it. So I really hated that disqualification.
Yeah, it irked me, and I feel like I have an axe to grind with the FIA, with the stewards, with F1, because it seems to me like for whatever reason, procedural errors or whatever are punished harsher than like extremely dangerous on track incidents.
Right.
You saw Stroll and Bottas take out basically half the field today, and what do they get? A 5-place grid penalty in the next race. Okay. What does Sebastian Vettel get for having half as much fuel left as he is supposed to have at the end of the race? Oh, that's 18 points that he loses out on. He doesn't get that podium finish. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me what these rulings are. And it totally irks me. But.
Yeah, I don't fault Stroll as much this week. He did take out some cars. It was a wet track. I think Lance Stroll's a fine driver, but I don't think he's one of the best. I think he was trying to sneak through some traffic there early on. Just misjudged it, lost some traction. But I felt, okay, Okay, the stewards think, no, he deserves a penalty. He's going to get a 5-place grid penalty for the next race. I was a little surprised because that was the same penalty Bottas got, and I thought what Bottas did was just so much more egregious. But you're right; it is sort of shocking that Bottas being Bottas takes out so many other drivers, essentially Red Bull, at the start of the race, and he gets a 5 grid penalty at the next race. In that Mercedes, that may have some impact on the race. But you're right. Vettel, with, half a liter of fuel left, loses out on a podium, loses all 18 points. I do agree with you there. I think some of these rulings are nonsensical. You can't justify, potentially costing Bottas a podium next race, while literally costing Vettel a podium this race when you look at what each did. And no one has been harder on Bottas, I think, than me. And he still continues to disappoint. I mean, as low a bar as I set, he still finds ways to go lower. I don't know what he was doing. I think maybe there was some momentary shame because at the start of the race, he had such a poor start. I think he probably had the worst start of anyone on the grid. And I think he just sort of felt, I've got to do something right away. And they showed the onboard. I think, who was it? Did he hit? Was it Norris? I mean, there was nothing Norris could do. That's a turn. It's on a wet track. There's nothing Norris could do. That was, as bad as I thought what Hamilton did to Verstappen last week. And I felt there should have been even a 1-race penalty against Hamilton. I think you can you can at least make the case that's a racing incident. What Bottas did today was just, it's like, you have to pay attention. This needs your full focus, and I don't even know what he was thinking. He just seemed out of it there at the start, and Norris, who's just somehow miraculously at the top. He's ahead of Bottas. I think he's ahead of even Perez in the points. He's had a string of 15 consecutive points finishes in the McLaren. Gets taken out like that. It was just tough to watch. And Leclerc, I mean, who's had sort of a worse 2021 than Charles Leclerc? I mean, once again taken out. There was nothing he could do. So I sort of think they are fully justified in their views of Bottas and Stroll as well this week, even though I think Stroll, there was just a bit of misfortune there.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched it back too many times, but it kind of seems to me like Stroll and Bottas did the same thing, and just like launched themselves into guys who were trying to turn, and it just was kind of ridiculous. It's like, we all know it's a wet track. Everyone's going into turn one. You kind of expect a little bit of mayhem, but Hamilton essentially was the only guy that got away scot-free, and then somehow Ocon and Vettel came through that mess unscathed. I don't know how, but they did. And yeah, I didn't really understand what Bottas or Stroll was doing. They needed to slow down and brake far earlier than they did. They seemed like they were like, no, I can get around people, and obviously they couldn't. So it was just a weird thing to see.
Yeah, I wonder if the summer break is coming exactly when needed, because the entire race had these odd incidents. Norris had an incident in the pits, which seemed a little surprising to me. I mean, I felt a bit reckless. And then Raikkonen literally took out Mazepin in the pits. It's like, what's going on? I mean, there was these unsafe releases, which you rarely see. I mean, it happens. You'll see it in a season. But there were what I felt were two very unsafe releases in the race. So maybe there's just all the teams, all the drivers are just weary. This has been a long first half, an odd first half. So I just thought that was sort of a little bit crazy that, Mazepin getting taken out in the pit lanes, basically. And so when you watch the replay of what Raikkonen did, who I believe, because Vettel was disqualified, actually got a point. It was pretty egregious, I thought. I was a little shocked by it.
Yeah, agreed. That was just, I don't know who was telling him to go, but they were wrong. I mean, Mazepin was coming in right there because I think Haas has their pit right in front of the Alfa Romeo team. And so Mazepin was coming in to get his pit done, and Raikkonen, spins his wheels and heads out there and smacks right into Mazepin and breaks I think it was his front suspension that he totally took out. And then Mazepin's race is done. And you think, when has that ever happened? When has somebody's car been taken out in the pits? Like, what a ridiculous thing to have happen. And, I thought a totally fair penalty given to Raikkonen in that situation, though I don't know, why it was any worse than Hamilton's last week, but, things happen, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things I think that's going to make this race so memorable, not just the result or the crashes, but were some of the images. So, for example, at the restart, Hamilton all by himself. That was so odd. I think Total Wolff has said they made the right call. They weren't sure of the track conditions. And they just wanted to stay on the tires. But seeing everyone else pitting, and so Hamilton starts and he's all alone on the grid, on the track. That was kind of shocking to me. Another great image, and there were so many of them, was Alonso just holding off Hamilton at lap after lap after lap when no one thought, well, not this lap. He can't hold him off another lap. He can't hold him off another lap. He can't hold him off another lap. And he kept doing it. I know everybody watching that race was just like, just leave the camera on these two guys. I don't care what's going on in the front of the grid. Just let's watch this battle. This is a classic battle. This is classic defensive driving. It's two of the great drivers ever. And so that was another great image. And then, Ocon, his first ever win, we get to see him up on the podium. We know from watching the race that his teammate Alonso helped him get that first podium. And so to see those two Alpines, a team that's sort of not doing its best and that has effectively stopped development for the year, just sort of driving side by side after the race. Ocon got first. Alonso came in fifth before the Vettel disqualification, and to see the two great Alpine, that beautiful livery, to see them driving around the track, that was another great image. This whole race was filled with great lasting images, I thought.
For sure. Yeah. I thought there were so many cool things to see, and I thought we got a great race heading into the summer break. A few disappointing things happened, but overall, just such a fun and kind of exciting and chaotic race to end sort of the first half of the season. And, I think it makes you excited for the next half. And I really hope that the next half is just as exciting and intense as this first half of the season was.
Yeah. And again, just so many amazing stories. The first win for Ocon, that Alonso Hamilton battle, Bottas taking out all those guys, Hamilton starting on the grid alone, the Williams getting points, both Williams. Just so many great storylines out of this. But, there was also just sort of just the sorrow as well, because Red Bull, I think this sort of may have, it doesn't end the battle, but that crash where Bottas took out Perez and damaged Max's car, that's another race where they get almost no points, where Perez gets no points. That's going to be so tough to come back from. Norris has been doing so well, and he's just been keeping that car right up there next to, right after Red Bull. He was taken out. Leclerc in the Ferrari, he gets taken out on that first lap. And it's not even the first lap. It's effectively the first turn on the first lap. Just so much heartbreak to go along with some of the great stories as well.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you see some of the memes and things like that of Mercedes and Toto Wolff, saying things like, "Oh, do whatever it takes to win," or like, "Bottas, you're up," right? But it does make you wonder, like, are Mercedes really pushing too hard? Because that's 2 races in a row that they have effectively on the first lap taken out their championship rival, and like without hesitation. They've just gone way too hard. And
without consequence.
Exactly.
Essentially.
It's a little bit concerning, I think, especially for Red Bull, because you're thinking to yourself, what the heck is this team going to do next? They're blaming Max for being too aggressive, but like 2 races in a row, they've taken him out. I don't know what to think about that, but it's not looking great for Red Bull at the moment.
Right. The Mercedes has the fastest car, the most reliable car. Red Bull has to do everything right. And up until Silverstone, they were. They had the sort of the misfortune, I think it was at Baku, where Max's tires went out. But Max and Red Bull has been doing everything right. Perez, less so. I'm not into conspiracy theories as much as I love them, but I am a big believer that sort of in team energy and in sort of your self-conscious notions or your self-conscious energy driving you. And you make a good point. That's 2 races in a row where the number 1 contender gets taken out by the number 1 contender. Mercedes takes out Max 2 races in a row. That's 50 points potential. And instead of 50 points, he has, I think, what did he get? 2? I think because of after the disqualification. So that's, that's pretty tough. So we'll see. I think we're going to see some great second half battles, race to race. But over the course of the season, I'm just not sure Red Bull has what it takes to go up against the Mercedes for a full second half of a season. So we have a segment that we call What's Wrong With and What's Right With. And before the race, we had sort of outlined what we wanted to talk about. What's wrong with Alpine? What's right with Ferrari? But this race sort of nullified some of that. So what's wrong with Alpine before this race? Because this was a great race for Alpine. Ocon gets first, and with the disqualification, Alonso gets fourth, and Alonso just raced such a great race. And Ocon, to his credit, as you said, he sort of weaved his way through all the traffic and debris and chaos in that after that initial crash, and this just never let up. He never quit. Sainz was on him. Hamilton wanted to go after him. There was a time when Russell was up there, and Ocon was not having it. He put up a great battle. But as great as it was for this race, there still are some issues that Alpine faces. So why don't you sort of outline what those are?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think you did mention it because I think in our haste to get to all the sort of chaotic stuff that happened in this race, we glossed over Ocon's win. But awesome drive from that guy. I'm glad that he is back in F1. And driving with the French team is very cool. But yeah, so before this race, we were going, what the heck is going on with Alpine? They've decided that they are going to stop development for this season's car and focus exclusively on sort of next season and the new car and regulations that go along with that. It's kind of disappointing because they're in a pretty close battle in that midfield. Before this race, I think there were 9 points sort of separating those three teams, Alpine, Aston, and AlphaTauri, and Alpine was at the back of the pack. Now, after this race, they've had an awesome race and are ahead by, I think, 11 points now. Kind of funky with the Vettel DQ. I don't know the exact points, but it's something like that. They have a close battle going this year, and you really hope that they can kind of keep battling and keep pace with those other teams, even though they have stopped development on the car this season, because it would be a real shame if they fell really far back from those other two teams.
Yeah, I love this race, and you're right. All credit to Ocon, a great race from him. His first F1 win. He held everyone off. He weaved his way from lap one and never let up. He was booted out of F1, and that's hard to come back. Albon was booted out. He's still not back in. Kvyat maybe, wants to get back in. Hulkenberg. There are a lot of great drivers out there who have been in F1 and want to return. And for the young Ocon, the Frenchman, getting his chance again, driving for the French team, and then getting that win, that was great to see. But you're right. Before this race, Alpine said they were halting development on this year's car. The focus is on next year. That's too bad because Ocon's a great young talent. Alonso's one of the best drivers ever. So I really hope that whatever's left in this year's Alpine car, the drivers get the most out of it because we certainly deserve that. On a different note, what's right with Ferrari? Leclerc got taken out once again, first lap, no points. We didn't get to see him drive, and I love to watch Leclerc drive. With Vettel's disqualification, Sainz, though, did make it onto the podium, third place. But as bad as Ferrari looked last year, this year they look pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Ferrari has definitely turned it around from last season. Ferrari, since they became an F1 constructor way back when in the 50s, they've been a perennial powerhouse. And since this sort of turbo hybrid era, they have kind of been off and on. The first few seasons, they were pretty tough to watch. And I think that's one of the reasons Alonso left Ferrari. Unfortunately, he got in an even worse McLaren. But Ferrari battled with Mercedes, with Vettel for a couple seasons here not too long ago. And that was really fun to watch. But last season, with Leclerc and Vettel in that car, they still did so poorly, at least by Ferrari standards. Last season, I think they finished with 131 points as a constructor. And so that's pretty tough. I think they were something like 80 points behind Renault last year, which you don't see from Ferrari. And, this season they're in fourth. They're behind Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren right now, I think. But, before this race, they had 148 points. So already 17 more than they finished the season last year. And then with Sainz, getting on a podium today, that's another 15 points added to their total. That's a significant jump from last year to this year. And, you hope with the new regulations coming for next season that they can make an even bigger jump next year and be in contention with Mercedes and Red Bull. And maybe McLaren can get up there too.
Yeah, Leclerc and Sainz are both excellent drivers, fairly young. They have, I assume, long careers ahead of them still. Ferrari has significantly improved over last year. You're right. Having Vettel and Leclerc last year, and they still 80 points behind Renault, and Renault wasn't great. That's shocking. That's how poor they were last year. So you're right. This has been a huge leap forward. Hopefully, we'll continue to see that for the rest of the season and into next year. Speaking of the rest of the season, there's a 3-week break. And my guess is, given some of the crashes and some of what was happening in pit lane today, it's a well-deserved break. But what are some of your favorite memories or favorite memory from the first half of this season? That might be difficult because I think this race had everything. This race had all the drama, all the chaos, all the surprises. But it has been a long season. And I just sort of wanted to get your thoughts on kind of like your favorite images from this first half.
Yeah, there were some good ones this season. I think it's been a season full of some really fun race weekends and some exciting developments in F1. And I'm kind of excited to see sort of the direction that the sport is going. But, two things that we didn't really get last season that are or have been sort of my favorite things from this season. One is pretty much every track, you get a whole lot of fans. And it's cool to see fans cheering on, their favorite drivers and their favorite teams. It brings a whole lot more energy and excitement to the races, which I think is a lot of fun. The other thing that we didn't get last season that we did this season is the iconic Monaco Grand Prix. And that was a fun race. It was a cool race. We were just talking about what's going right with Ferrari. Well, Leclerc got on pole there. Unfortunately, he crashed and couldn't start the race. But then we got a pretty cool podium: Verstappen, Sainz, and Norris. And then to round out the top 6, we got Perez, Vettel, and Gasly. That was a fun race. Monaco is always great. It's the one GP every year that I look forward to most. It's so iconic. It's glitz and glamour, and it's everything that I hope Miami will be next year.
Miami will be the American version of that. A little bit, a little bit crazier, a little less classier is what I think will how that one will play out next year. For me, it's funny you mentioned Monaco, because that's probably my most frustrating memory of the first half of the season, because Leclerc gets pole but couldn't even run the race. Because of the crash in qualifying. So that was just so frustrating. You think we're going to see, a Montesquieu, Leclerc in Ferrari at pole in Monaco, and he could win. And we didn't get to see any of that. It just sort of felt that the Charles's, impertinence and Ferrari's sort of, current reliability state just sort of robbed us of that great opportunity. I know there's not much they could have done about it, but I really was looking forward to that. I think another favorite memory of mine from the first half of this season was, I always loved Baku and just Verstappen closing in on a win. He has just been lighting it up the whole race. No one is going to catch him. And his tire gives out. He just goes careening into the wall. There's nothing he could do. It was so close to the end. From 25 points to 0. He's out of the race. They have to stop the race. So I think that was heartbreak for Max, but that was kind of one of my other favorite memories from the first half of the season.
Yeah, that was totally a fun race. I think it was Perez's first win in the Red Bull. That was a fun race, and those two back to back, Monaco and then Baku, fun city circuits, I think. And I'm with you. I love the Baku race, but thinking back on this, the F1 calendar is really long, especially this season. They have a lot of races this season, and I was just trying to think of some of the highlights and things that happened this season. And, thinking back to Imola, I think it was the second race of this season where Russell and Bottas crashed at high speed, right, as Russell was trying to go past him and caught like the edge of the wet grass and just careened into Bottas, and they both came out, and George was furious. He got out of his car and he went over to Bottas and I think like smacked him on the head. And, I literally thought that was from last season. So it kind of makes you, excited for kind of all the craziness and excitement for the second half of this season.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Belgium. That's usually a good course, but still 3 weeks away. One of the things, we rolled out our Across the Line feature last week, and that's where we make our top 5. And we each get to choose who we think our top 5 is, but once a driver is selected, he gets taken off. He's no longer available. And 1 point for each correct answer, but 3 points if we choose them in that exact order. So if we choose Hamilton to come in first and he does, we get 3 points. If we choose Alonso to come in third, but he comes in fourth, we get 1 point. Because there's such a long wait until the next race, I don't know if we should make our selections just yet, but I did want to review them because our selections for this race seemed reasonable. And it turned out to be wildly incorrect. So for this race, Hungary, you chose Verstappen in first, Norris second, then Sainz, then Ricciardo, then Alonso. Some curious selections, but Verstappen, Norris, and Sainz in the top 5 is extremely rational. That's a good, solid bet. The only one correct was Sainz. He finished in the top 5. No, I'm sorry. Alonso also finished in the top 5. You're right.
There we go.
Thank you. Sainz, right. In Sainz, you actually picked third, and he came in fourth. However, with the disqualification, Sainz got third. So that's 3 points for you. And then 1 point because you also chose Alonso, who came in fifth. That's what you chose him. And he actually did, but because of the disqualification, that's now fourth, so it's 1 point. I chose, and again, I thought this was reasonable, Bottas, then Hamilton, then Leclerc, then Perez, then Vettel. That's again a solid pick in this track. Choosing Mercedes, I got to choose both Mercedes drivers. Charles Leclerc doing well. That's a pretty solid bet. I also only come away with 4 points because Hamilton I chose to come in second, and with the disqualification he did, so that's 3 points. And actually, no, Vettel, because Vettel's disqualified, so I don't even get 1 point. So you are now in the lead, 4 points to 3, because of this crazy Hungary race where we both made fairly reasonable, rational selections. But this was just such a crazy race. So we'll do across the line in our next episode for the Belgium race. And then I'll go over how we choose and how we score. But speaking of crazy, we always have a crazy prediction for what we think will happen in the next race or over the course of the next week. For this race, my crazy prediction was Russell comes in 9th, that he gets his first ever points for Williams. That sort of came true. He got his first ever points for Williams. He did come in 9th, but with Vettel's disqualification, now 8th. But that was a pretty solid, crazy prediction. Now, what was your crazy prediction for this race?
Well, I had 2, but one of them was that all 4 Red Bull associated cars would come in the points, which turned out to be pretty close. You had Gasly and Tsunoda up in, with the disqualification, 5th and 6th, Verstappen in 9th, and the only one, Perez, that didn't come in the points was taken out on the first corner. So, it's pretty close.
Good crazy prediction. You're right. That was a good one. What was the second one?
The second one was not close at all. I said a Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari podium. And we got a Ferrari on the podium, but...
Technically, Ferrari got on the podium because of the Vettel.
Yeah.
So my crazy prediction, the next race is 3 weeks away, so I'm not going to make a crazy prediction for the race just yet. My crazy prediction mixes a little bit of conspiracy theory with, I think, the harsh reality of F1. My crazy prediction is that in under 2 weeks, Toto Wolff will announce his 2022 Mercedes lineup. Hamilton is already signed, and his second driver will be Valtteri Bottas. I know no one wants him, but Valtteri Bottas, like it or not, has done exactly the job Toto Wolff wants. And this race was such a great, fun race. Hungary 2021 was such a great, fun race that I'm actually a little peeved with Toto Wolff. Mercedes in the turbo hybrid era has had the best car by far. They win year after year after year, first and second every year. It's been the same way for 7 or 8 years. When Hamilton and Nico Rosberg were on the same team, they battled it out. If they were ever friends, I doubt they are anymore. That was a fierce competition. Hamilton won, then again, and then Rosberg won. And they even had a famous crash. And there was so much bad blood, so much acrimony, so much negative energy that I think Toto Wolff made the very rational decision of keeping Hamilton. He knows he has the best car and one of the best drivers ever. So he knows he's going to get first and they'll get the championships. And for that second driver, he wants someone with no negative energy, that won't challenge Hamilton, that won't really bring any sort of negativity into the team, that just sort of does what he's told. And that's Valtteri Bottas. So I don't fault Toto Wolff for making what I think are very rational decisions. But as a fan, I'm now angry because I want to see number 1 and number 2 battle it out. I want to see friend against friend. I want a civil war. And we've lost out on that. And I think if Wolff does what everyone wants him to, which is bring George Russell onto the team, we're going to have that civil war. We're going to have that negative energy. We're going to have someone who fights Lewis Hamilton every step of the way. And I think Wolff and Hamilton have made the decision that that's not going to be allowed to happen. So my crazy prediction that I think is not so crazy is that seat does not go to Russell. It will go to Bottas.
Yeah, that I don't think is crazy to me. That's kind of what I have been anticipating for a long time, especially since Bahrain, I think, last year when George came over and drove in Hamilton's seat and absolutely shit on the rest of the field, and Mercedes actively screwed him over so that he didn't get the win that he should have. He dominated Bottas. There wasn't anybody that could even come close to him. And I think at that point, Mercedes and Toto Wolff decided that they couldn't have two drivers like that. We saw it with Rosberg, and actually, Rosberg was a part of the Sky Sports coverage this weekend. And one of the things that he said that I sort of laughed at was he said Hamilton and Bottas have never had a coming together. They've never crashed into each other. And you think about Hamilton's actual battles with guys in the championship fight with Rosberg. He had one very memorable crash, and I think more than just that one with Rosberg. He had a few in his tussle with Vettel. He's had a few with Verstappen, never with his teammate Bottas. And that has deprived every F1 fan of real hard, good racing. And that's very disappointing. But I don't think that's going to change, because if it does, then who's to say where Mercedes and Hamilton end up? So
I know, and like I said, as a fan, I'm disappointed. I think Wolff has made very wise, rational decisions. But with Mercedes having the best car for so many years, it just think of all the battles we could have seen if there was a Russell in that second seat, or Verstappen, or bringing Alonso back, for example, or Ocon, who Wolff manages. So, that's my crazy prediction. I think everyone just assumes Russell will get that seat. I don't think so. Do you have a crazy prediction for either the break or the next race in Belgium?
I don't know if I have one for either of them. I have an absolutely crazy, ridiculous prediction for the rest of the season. And that is that we see a McLaren, a Ferrari, and an Alpine each get one race win.
Wow. So another win in the second half of the season for Alpine.
Yes. Yeah, see, it's crazy. It's bold.
It is. Well, I think, though, the season is so long that is possible. And we could even see Aston with Vettel in there. I mean, that car is good enough. Vettel is still good enough where if some craziness happens again, he actually could win a race again. So I think that is a little bit crazy, but it just might work. Well, it's been a great first half. I think this was a great race. This was a great discussion. I look forward to doing it again. We may do one just before Belgium, and then we'll get back at it. I want to thank all of our listeners. Thank you for listening to the world's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And we are lights out.
See ya.